I called my parents to say my husband had died in an accident and my son was in the ICU. But they said, "It's your sister's birthday. Please stay with me as I share what happened, because it's a story that still keeps me awake at night, and maybe it will make you think about who truly stands by you when life falls apart." It was just after midnight when the phone rang. I remember because I had been half asleep on the couch, the TV still playing quietly in the background. The call came from a number I didn't recognize, and for a split second I almost didn't answer. But something in my chest told me I had to. "Mrs. Sanders?" A man's voice asked, calm but rushed. "This is Officer Daniels. There's been an accident. Your husband Robert and your son John were in a car crash. You need to get to St. Mary's Hospital right away." I felt the room tilt. My hands shook so badly that I almost dropped the phone. All I could manage was, Are they alive?" The officer's pause said more than his words. "Your husband is in critical condition. Your son is in surgery. Please drive safely." I don't remember how I grabbed my coat, my purse, or even how I locked the door. The whole drive to the hospital is a blur of red lights and silent prayers. By the time I arrived, I was already crying so hard my vision blurred. The nurse at the desk guided me to the ICU. The words she used, serious injuries, "We'll do everything we can," felt like knives in my chest. When I peeked into John's room, I saw my boy, my sweet 15-year-old, pale and still, tubes and wires covering him. My knees buckled, and I had to hold onto the wall to stay standing. Then came Robert. They didn't let me in, but they told me enough. Head trauma. Broken ribs. His heart wasn't strong. They didn't know if he'd make it through the night. In that moment, I felt smaller than I had ever felt in my life. The weight of fear crushed me, and all I wanted was my family, someone to sit beside me, to tell me I wasn't alone. So I did what any daughter would do. I called my parents. The phone rang 3 times before my mom picked up, her voice full of background noise. Laughter, music, clinking glasses. "Mom," I sobbed. "Robert's been in an accident. He might not make it. John is in the ICU. I need you. Please come." There was a pause, and then she sighed. "Marley, it's Ava's birthday tonight. We can't just leave. She'd be devastated if we walked out. We'll call you in the morning." I thought I'd misheard. "Mom, did you hear me? Robert could die. John, he's a child, he's hurt so badly. I can't do this alone. Please." But her voice only grew colder. "Marley, you always make everything dramatic. Don't ruin Ava's special night. We'll check in tomorrow." And just like that, she hung up. I stared at the phone in my hand, the screen glowing, my tears dripping onto it. My parents, my own blood, had chosen a party over their daughter's shattered world. In that sterile hospital hallway, surrounded by the beeping of machines and the faint smell of antiseptic, I realized something I had always tried to ignore. In my family, I was never the priority. I sank into a chair outside John's room, clutching my coat around me like it could shield me from the truth. Robert was fighting for his life. My son was broken and fragile, and I was completely alone. For the first time, I understood just how deeply my family had abandoned me. Growing up, I always knew I wasn't the favorite. Ava, my younger sister, had a light that my parents adored. She was prettier, louder, and had this way of making everything about her. When relatives visited, they'd gush over Ava's laugh, her smile, her hair. I was the one who cleared the dishes and made sure the guests had enough to eat. No one noticed the effort, but everyone noticed Ava twirling in the center of the room like the star of a play. I remember birthdays most of all. On Ava's 10th, my parents rented a pony and invited the whole neighborhood. Balloons, a cake taller than I'd ever seen, and gifts stacked higher than she was. My own birthday, just 6 months later, was a small cake at the kitchen table with my mom saying, "We can't spend big every time, Marley. Be understanding." I smiled because that's what was expected. I was the good daughter, the one who didn't make a fuss. When we were teenagers, the difference only grew. I got good grades, kept curfews, helped mom in the kitchen. Ava stayed out late, failed classes, and always seemed to have a new excuse. But instead of being held accountable, she got sympathy. "She's just finding herself," Dad would say, while I folded laundry and pretended my stomach didn't knot with jealousy. If I asked for something simple, a ride to practice, a little help with school supplies, I was told to be patient. If Ava asked, she got it, no questions asked. The cruelest part was how deeply I wanted to believe it would change. When I got married, I thought maybe my parents would finally look at me and see I had built something of my own. They showed up to the wedding, but every compliment I received seemed to circle back to Ava. Your maid of honor looked so beautiful, relatives whispered. My own big day somehow became another stage for my sister. Still, I swallowed it. I thought maybe when children came into the picture, when John was born, they'd finally treat me with the tenderness they always gave her. But even then, Ava remained their star. They babysat John occasionally, yes, but more often than not, their schedules revolved around Ava's wants. Her job interviews, her nights out, her heartbreaks, those were emergencies. My sleepless nights, my struggles as a young mother, were simply what all moms go through. I told myself I was strong enough to handle it, but deep down, I still craved the feeling of being chosen. And now, sitting in the hospital with John fighting for his life and Robert slipping away, the truth hit me like ice water. Nothing had changed. My parents didn't even hesitate before choosing Ava's birthday party over my pain. All those years of hoping they would see me, appreciate me, love me in the way I needed, it was all wasted. I could still hear my mother's voice from that call, sharp and dismissive. Don't ruin Ava's special night. Ava's special night. Even as my world collapsed, my parents' loyalty stayed with her. She was still the golden child, and I was still the one expected to endure silently. The flashbacks crowded my mind, me at 16, waiting on the porch for Dad to come watch my school play, only to hear later that Ava had needed help picking out an outfit, so he never came. Me at 20, bringing home my first job offer, only to have the moment overshadowed because Ava had broken up with another boyfriend. All those little moments I had buried resurfaced, sharp and painful, reminding me that this wasn't new. This was a pattern. I sat in that hospital hallway, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, and finally let the truth settle in. My parents were never going to choose me. Not then, not now, not ever. The resentment that had lived quietly in the back of my heart for years grew louder, angrier. I wasn't just the overlooked daughter, I was the invisible one. And in that realization, I felt something shift inside me. For the first time, I wasn't just hurt. I was done hoping. Robert didn't make it through the night. The doctors tried, but the head injuries were too severe. When the surgeon came out, his face already told me what his words would confirm. My husband was gone. Just like that, the man I had built a life with, the father of my child, was no more. I felt numb. Grief pressed down on me, heavy and suffocating, but I didn't have the luxury of breaking down. John was still in the ICU, hooked up to machines, his small body fighting to stay alive. I had to keep going for him. Even through the haze of shock, I knew there were things that needed to be done. Robert needed a funeral. Planning it felt like a cruel dream. I sat at the dining table with papers scattered around me. Obituaries to write, flowers to choose, a casket to pick. Every decision felt impossible, yet unavoidable. I called the funeral home, my voice flat, answering questions about hymns and programs while my heart screamed inside. How could I be making these choices alone? I reached out to my parents again, not because I expected much, but because I wanted to believe they might come through this time. My father answered, his tone already impatient. Dad, I said, trying not to cry. Robert passed away. I'm planning the funeral. Please, I need you and Mom there. There was a long silence before he finally said, Marley, your sister needs us right now. Ava's going through something, and we can't just abandon her. My grip tightened on the phone. Dad, I just lost my husband. Your grandson might not survive. And you're telling me Ava needs you more. His answer was final. You'll manage. You always do. When he hung up, the line went dead, but so did something inside me. My parents had chosen Ava again, even in the face of death. The anger sat beneath my grief, quiet but burning. The day of the funeral came. The sky was gray, heavy with the threat of rain. I stood at the front of the small chapel, looking out at the faces of neighbors, co-workers, and a few distant relatives who had shown up. But the seats I wanted filled most, my parents, my sister, remained empty. Every time the doors opened, I hoped for a second it would be them. It never was. I managed to get through the service, though my hands trembled as I read the eulogy. My voice cracked when I spoke about Robert as a father, how he tucked John in every night, how he always tried to fix things even if he wasn't good at it. People cried quietly in their pews. I felt like I was floating outside of myself, watching a version of me stand there and survive it. When the service ended, people came up with the usual phrases. He's in a better place. Stay strong. We're praying for you. I nodded, thanked them, but their words slid off me like rain. Then there was Linda, my neighbor from across the street. She came over, wrapped me in a hug, and whispered, "You don't have to do this alone. I'll help." And she meant it. Linda showed up with casseroles, offered to sit with John when I needed a shower, and even drove me to the cemetery when I didn't think I could face the drive. She was just a neighbor, not family, yet she did more for me in those days than my own blood had done in years. As I stood by Robert's grave, watching the earth cover the coffin, I realized something with startling clarity. Family isn't always about blood. It's about who shows up when your world is falling apart. My parents chose Ava, but Linda chose me. I walked away from that funeral broken, yes, but not as alone as I thought. And beneath the sorrow, a quiet fury was taking root. Someday, my parents would see exactly what they had thrown away. After the funeral, the house felt colder than ever. Robert's shoes were still by the door, his jacket still hanging on the hook, but the man who filled them was gone. I thought grief would be the only weight I'd carry, but soon another heaviness crept in. The slow unraveling of secrets I hadn't been ready to face. It started with the bills. I was sorting through stacks of paperwork when I noticed credit card statements addressed to Robert. At first, I didn't think much of it. He'd handled most of the finances. But as I scanned the pages, my stomach twisted. Charges for expensive dinners, hotels across town, even jewelry stores I knew he hadn't bought me anything from. My chest tightened. Why would he spend hundreds at a hotel when we lived only 15 minutes away? I pushed the thought down, telling myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe business meetings, maybe gifts for clients. But the pit in my stomach wouldn't let me rest. Then came the phone. Robert's cell had been returned to me with his things. I charged it, not even sure why, and found messages that made my hands tremble. Conversations filled with affection late night, "I miss you" texts, and plans to meet at the very hotels I'd seen on the bills. Some messages were short, others intimate, but all of them told me what I didn't want to accept. Robert had been unfaithful. For a long while, I just sat on the edge of the bed staring at the screen. Part of me wanted to throw the phone against the wall, to shatter it so I wouldn't have to look at the truth. Another part of me wanted to scroll deeper, to know every detail, as if understanding could dull the betrayal. When I finally gathered the courage to face the world outside my front door, whispers followed me. At the grocery store, a woman from Robert's office gave me a look that lingered too long. At the pharmacy, someone lowered their voice when they said his name. It was subtle, but I caught it. People knew things I didn't. My grief had left me blind, but now my ears picked up every hint, every sideways glance. I decided to visit Robert's workplace, thinking maybe I could collect his personal things, get some closure. Instead, I walked into more shadows. One of his co-workers, a man named Kevin, pulled me aside when he saw me. He hesitated, then said, "Marley, I probably shouldn't say this, but Robert wasn't always honest with you." His eyes were heavy with pity, and I hated it. I left before he could say more, but the words stuck like thorns. Back at home, I dug further into the phone. That's when I found it, the piece of evidence that made everything click. A contact name saved simply as A. At first, I thought it was just another woman, someone anonymous. But when I read the messages closely, my blood ran cold. The conversations weren't just flirty, they were familiar. They referenced family dinners, little jokes only someone close would understand. And then there it was, a message that ended with, "Don't worry, she'll never find out. Love you, Ava." I dropped the phone like it had burned me. My own sister. The room spun as memories resurfaced. Robert defending Ava during arguments, Ava declining dates because she was busy. The way they sometimes shared glances I had brushed off as nothing. All the little things I had ignored suddenly made sickening sense. I sat there in silence, grief mixing with rage until I couldn't tell one from the other. Losing Robert had been hard enough. But discovering that he hadn't really been mine, that he had betrayed me with the one person who should have had my back, cut deeper than any coffin lowering into the ground. The cracks in my marriage weren't cracks at all. They were canyons, wide and unforgiving, and I had been standing on the edge the whole time without seeing it. Now I finally did. When I first read Ava's name on Robert's phone, I wanted to believe it was a mistake. Maybe I misread it. Maybe there was some explanation. But the more I scrolled, the clearer it became. My husband and my sister weren't just close. They were lovers. The words blurred as I tried to take them in. Messages about weekends together, little notes about how I wouldn't suspect a thing, and promises that once things settled, they'd have more time for each other. Every line dug deeper into me. And then the flashbacks began, uninvited and cruel. I remembered how Ava had always brushed off questions about her dating life. Whenever Mom asked if she was seeing anyone, she'd laugh and say, "I'm too busy," or "no one worth my time." I used to think maybe she was being picky. Now I realized she wasn't single. She was just hiding the fact that her secret man was already married to me. Another memory came rushing in. Robert and I had argued once about Ava moving back in with my parents after college. I had said she needed to grow up, take care of herself, stop depending on them. Robert's face had gone red, his voice sharper than I'd ever heard when he said, "Don't talk about her like that. She's doing her best." At the time, I thought he was just being kind. But now I saw it differently. He wasn't protecting her out of decency. He was protecting her because they were entangled in a way I hadn't dared to imagine. Then there were the dinners. I'd cook, set the table, and sometimes Ava would stop by unannounced. Robert's eyes would light up in a way I thought was just him being friendly. I remembered one evening when John was telling us a story from school. Robert and Ava exchanged a small smile, almost like they shared an inside joke. I brushed it off as nothing, but now, replaying it, that smile made my stomach churn. Each flashback stacked on the last until the betrayal towered over me, impossible to ignore. It wasn't just infidelity. It was treason against everything I thought family was supposed to mean. I had loved Robert. I had trusted him with my heart, my life, my child. And Ava? She was supposed to be my sister, my ally against the world, the one who understood our family's dysfunction because she had lived it too. But instead of standing beside me, she had slipped into my life like a thief, stealing the one person I thought was mine. Grief no longer felt pure. It tangled with rage, twisting until I didn't know if I was crying because I missed Robert or because I hated him. I sat in the silence of the house, the ticking clock too loud, my chest rising and falling too fast. It felt like my entire life had been one long joke, and I was the punchline. I thought about John lying in the ICU, fighting to stay alive. He didn't know his father had betrayed us. He didn't know the aunt he trusted had taken part in destroying our family. I wanted to protect him from it, but at the same time, the truth clawed at me. The pain was almost unbearable, but under it, something else began to grow. Anger. Cold, sharp anger that cut through the fog of sorrow. Robert might be gone, but Ava was still here. She was walking around freely, smiling, laughing, as if she hadn't torn me apart. I clenched my fists until my nails dug into my palms. My tears dried, replaced with heat in my chest. I had lost my husband to death, but I had lost him long before that, to her. And I couldn't let it stand. The betrayal was unthinkable, yes, but it was real. And if Ava thought I was just going to crumble under the weight of it, she didn't know me as well as she thought. I wanted to scream, to drive to Ava's place and tear the truth out of her. But rage alone wasn't going to fix what had been done. Robert was gone. My marriage was ashes. My family had abandoned me. If I exploded now, all I'd have left would be my anger. And Ava would keep on living her golden girl life, protected and adored. So instead, I forced myself to be calm. Cold. Calculated. The first thing I did was gather proof. I charged Robert's phone again and backed up every message between him and Ava. I took photos of the screen, saved them to a flash drive, and even printed some out just in case. My hands shook the whole time, but I kept going. I found receipts in his desk, hotel stays, dinners, gifts. Some were signed with his name, others with just a scribbled R. Each one went into a folder I labeled with quiet precision, evidence. It wasn't enough to know they had betrayed me. I wanted the world to know. Over the next weeks, while John recovered slowly in the ICU, I used my time in waiting rooms to dig deeper. I visited the bank, reviewed joint accounts, and saw patterns I'd never questioned before. Money missing, payments to cards I hadn't even known Robert opened. Tracing it further, I realized some of those payments matched accounts under Ava's name. That discovery made my blood run hot. Ava hadn't just taken my husband. She had been leeching off him financially, and my parents had known. It explained so much. The whispers about Ava struggling. The way my parents always made excuses for her. She wasn't independent. She was being carried, shielded, and spoiled just like she always had been. I tested this theory by calling my mom casually one evening. I asked if Ava was doing okay, if she had work lined up. My mother's tone was clipped, defensive. She's fine. Don't worry about her. We're helping her through a tough time. Tough time? I pressed. What kind of tough time? She's just between things, Mom said. It's not important. But it was important. Every word confirmed what I suspected. Ava was still living off them, still protected by their money, their excuses, their lies. And that gave me an idea. If Ava's image was her shield, then breaking that image would be my weapon. She lived in the safety of being adored, the golden daughter, the one everyone admired. But if people saw her for who she really was, if they knew the truth she and Robert had hidden, her pedestal would crack. I spent long nights writing everything down. A timeline of events. Screenshots taped into a notebook. A list of people who needed to know the truth. Family, friends, even those co-workers of Robert's who had looked at me with pity. I wanted Ava's betrayal exposed, not whispered about behind closed doors. But revenge wasn't just about humiliating her. I wanted to cut off her lifeline too. If my parents had spent years bailing her out, then I'd make sure they thought twice before doing it again. Evidence of her relationship with Robert, proof of her dependence. It would all become a tool, a way to strip her of the comfort she had stolen from me. I didn't act yet. I waited, I observed. Each time Ava's name came up in conversation, I bit my tongue and stored the anger away. Each smile I gave in public was a mask. Inside, I was sharpening my knives, not real ones, but the kind that cut deeper. Truth, exposure, consequence. And for the first time since the accident, I felt steady. Not healed, not whole, but steady. Ava thought she had won by taking what was mine. What she didn't realize was that I wasn't going to fight her with screaming or begging. I was going to destroy her carefully, piece by piece, until nothing of her golden girl shine was left. The days in the ICU dragged on, each one blurring into the next. The machines beeped steadily, nurses moved in and out with soft voices, and I sat in the hard chair by John's bed, clutching his hand and whispering prayers into the sterile air. At first, he was unresponsive, his small chest rising and falling with the help of tubes. I thought I might lose him too, and the thought nearly broke me. Then, little by little, hope appeared. One morning, I saw his eyelids flicker. The next, his fingers twitched when I held them. The doctors said it was a good sign, that his body was fighting. I cried when he finally opened his eyes, his gaze groggy and confused, but still my John. "Mom," he whispered, voice barely there. I smoothed his hair back and kissed his forehead, my heart flooding with relief. From that moment, I knew I had to be stronger than I'd ever been. Losing Robert had shattered me, but John's recovery gave me something to hold on to. He needed me. I couldn't afford to fall apart, not now. Every day, I sat with him while he endured treatments and therapy. I encouraged him when he tried to move his arm, when he took his first sip of water without choking, when he managed to smile despite the pain. Each small victory became fuel for me. Watching him fight so bravely, I realized I had no excuse to stay broken. The truth about Robert and Ava still burned inside me, but instead of crushing me, it began to sharpen me. The grief I once drowned in became steel in my spine. I stopped expecting calls from my parents. I stopped waiting for Ava to show up with fake apologies. They had abandoned me in my darkest hour, certain I'd crumble under the weight of it all. And maybe that's what they wanted, to see me reduced to nothing so Ava could keep her place on the pedestal. But they underestimated me. With every step John took toward healing, I took one toward reclaiming myself. I read through the folder of evidence late at night while he slept, refining my plan, thinking about how and when to strike. Each document, each message, each receipt became a piece of armor. I wasn't powerless anymore. I wasn't just a grieving widow or a forgotten daughter. I was a mother with fire in her veins and a clear target in her sights. The turning point came one afternoon when John, still pale and weak, gripped the side of the bed and tried to sit up on his own. "I want to walk again, Mom," he whispered. His determination nearly broke me with pride. With the help of a nurse, he managed to swing his legs over the side and place his feet on the floor. He trembled, but he stood, just for a moment. Tears streamed down my face as I held his arm steady. That tiny step meant more than anything. It meant he wasn't giving up. And if my child could rise after everything, then so could I. That night, as I tucked him in, I promised myself silently, this wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about justice. About making sure Ava and my parents saw that the woman they overlooked, dismissed, and betrayed wasn't weak. She was stronger than ever. With John's recovery lighting the path ahead, I knew the time for patience was ending. Soon it would be time to act. And when I did, none of them would see me coming. The day I chose to reveal the truth, I felt strangely calm. Months of carrying the secret, of letting it eat at me in silence, had forged a kind of steel in me. My parents had planned a family gathering at their house. One of those dinners where they showed off Ava like she was the crown jewel of the family. Normally, I would have declined. But this time, I accepted with a smile. I dressed simply, nothing flashy, and brought along a neatly organized folder. Inside were the texts, the receipts, the printed screenshots, every piece of evidence Robert had left behind. As I walked into the living room, the familiar scene played out. Ava laughing in the center, my parents hovering around her, everyone else orbiting like planets around the sun. "Marley, you made it," my mother said, more out of politeness than warmth. She didn't hug me. She never did. I greeted a few cousins, accepted a glass of water, and waited. Dinner was loud, as it always was, filled with chatter and Ava's voice carrying above the rest. She told stories about her job interviews, about her hardships, and my parents nodded with sympathy as though she were carrying the world on her shoulders. When dessert was served, I stood up, my chair scraping across the floor. The room quieted, all eyes on me. For once, Ava wasn't the center of attention. "I need to share something," I said, my voice steady. "Something that's been hidden for too long." My parents frowned. "Marley, this isn't the time," my father muttered. "No," I said firmly. "It's exactly the time." I pulled the folder from my bag and laid it on the table. I flipped it open, showing the first page, a printed text exchange between Robert and Ava. The words were clear: "I miss you. I can't wait until we're alone again." Gasps rippled through the room. My aunt covered her mouth. My uncle muttered, "Good Lord." Ava's face drained of color. Those aren't real." "They're real," I cut in, turning the page to show receipts for hotel rooms, dinners, and jewelry. He wasn't just my husband. He was her secret. My sister's. The room erupted. Relatives whispered harshly, some outright staring at Ava with disgust. My parents tried to speak over the noise. "Stop this nonsense," my mother snapped, her cheeks red. "Marley, you're just making drama. You're grieving, and you don't know what you're saying." I met her gaze. "Don't you dare tell me I don't know what I'm saying. I buried my husband while you were busy throwing Ava a birthday party. And now you want to call me dramatic because the truth doesn't fit your Golden Girl fantasy." My father slammed his hand on the table. Enough! But it wasn't enough. The relatives weren't buying their excuses. One cousin shook his head and muttered, "I always thought something was off." Another aunt said flatly, "This is disgusting, Ava." Ava's voice broke as she tried to defend herself. "I didn't mean for it to happen, it just—" "No," I said sharply. "You chose this. You betrayed me. You betrayed your own nephew." The room fell into an uneasy silence, broken only by the sound of Ava sobbing. My parents sat stiffly, still trying to shield her, but the tide had turned. The family they counted on to adore Ava now saw her for what she was. The golden child's shine was gone, replaced with shame. I gathered my folder, leaving the copies scattered on the table for anyone who wanted them. "I'm done being quiet," I said, my voice firm. "The truth is out now. Do with it what you will." And with that, I walked out of the house. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the overlooked daughter. I was the one holding the truth, and Ava's perfect image lay shattered in the ruins behind me. After the night I exposed Ava, things in our family were never the same. The whispers spread quickly. Our relatives talked, neighbors talked. Even people at church looked at Ava differently. Her polished image of being the perfect daughter, the golden sister, was cracked beyond repair. But I knew words alone wouldn't be enough. Ava had spent her whole life leaning on others, especially my parents, and they had always carried her mistakes. If I wanted real change, I had to make sure the cycle finally broke. I had the evidence, screenshots, receipts, copies of transactions. Ava had been taking money from my parents for years, pretending she was working toward a career, while in reality she used most of it for shopping, nights out, and covering her lies. With everything Robert had left behind, I even found messages showing how Ava had pressured him to help her out when my parents couldn't. She thrived on using people. This time I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I simply mailed copies of the financial evidence to the bank officer who managed my parents' accounts, along with a letter making it clear I would no longer be responsible for bailing Ava out when her debts came knocking. For years, my parents had hinted that I should chip in when Ava overspent, guilt-tripping me about being the responsible one. That ended now. I called them directly and said it plainly. "Don't ask me for a cent. Ava made her bed. She can lie in it." The silence on the other end of the line was heavy. My mother tried her old tactics, sighing and saying, "Marley, family helps family." I responded with a calmness I hadn't felt before. Family also doesn't sleep with their sister's husband. Family doesn't abandon their daughter when she calls from a hospital. You can choose Ava if you want, but don't expect me or my son to stick around for that. And then, for the first time in my life, I hung up on her. Walking away wasn't easy, but it was necessary. John was recovering. Each small milestone in the ICU felt like a miracle. The thought of him growing up in the same toxic cycle I had endured terrified me. I wanted him to know love that wasn't conditional, support that wasn't one-sided. I promised myself he would never feel like the forgotten child, the shadow standing behind someone else's spotlight. Meanwhile, Ava's life began unraveling. With my parents' finances cut off and her reputation in shreds, people stopped trusting her. The jobs she applied for didn't call back. Friends who once adored her pulled away, embarrassed by the scandal. She wasn't the sparkling center of attention anymore. She was someone to avoid. The more she struggled, the more desperate she became. But this time, there was no safety net. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Seeing her face reality was enough. As for me, I quietly built a new foundation. I started working extra shifts and took online courses to expand my career options. Linda, my kind neighbor who had stood by me when no one else did, often helped with John, reminding me that real support doesn't come from blood. It comes from love. Slowly, the pieces of my life started to fall into place. For the first time in years, I felt free. Free from my parents' control, free from Ava's shadow, free from carrying the weight of a family that never carried me. My life was still scarred, yes, but it was mine. And as I held John's hand one evening, watching him smile as he took another wobbly step, I knew I was building something stronger than anything they could destroy. A new life where love wasn't conditional, and where my son would never doubt his worth. I had turned the tables, and I wasn't going back. I never imagined my life would turn out the way it did. Losing Robert in that sudden accident felt like the end of everything I knew. For a while, I couldn't even breathe without the weight of grief pressing on my chest. But what cut even deeper than death was what came after. The betrayals I uncovered, the abandonment from my own family, the truth that shattered every illusion I had carried since childhood. Looking back now, I can see that the accident was a cruel turning point, but it was also the moment that forced me to wake up. For years, I had lived quietly in the background, the daughter who didn't ask for much, the wife who tried to hold everything together. I told myself that if I worked harder, gave more, forgave faster, then maybe love would be returned. But the truth was, I had been giving my whole heart to people who only knew how to take. Robert's betrayal with Ava tore me in ways I didn't know I could be torn. The man I trusted with my life, the father of my child, had chosen my own sister over me. And my parents, who should have protected me, stood by her even after everything came to light. I realized then that their loyalty was never mine to count on. They had made their choice long ago when they crowned Ava their golden child. The only difference now was that I finally stopped fighting for a place in a family that never wanted me. What surprised me most wasn't their cruelty. It was my strength. At first, I thought I was breaking, that I wouldn't survive the weight of it all. But in every sleepless night sitting beside John's hospital bed, in every small victory when he opened his eyes or moved his fingers, I found a new kind of power. I wasn't just a widow. I wasn't just a forgotten daughter. I was a mother, and that meant I had something worth standing tall for. I began to rebuild, not in grand, sweeping gestures, but in quiet, steady steps. Every bill I paid on my own, every new skill I learned, every decision I made without asking for permission was a piece of the new foundation I was laying. I had lived too long under the shadow of other people's choices, but now, I was carving out my own path. For the first time, my life belonged to me. The betrayal left scars, yes. Some nights, I still wake up and feel the sting of it all. But those scars are not signs of weakness. They are proof that I walked through fire and came out on the other side, not untouched, but unbroken. My parents may never understand, and Ava may never regret, but none of that matters anymore. Their choices are theirs to live with. Mine is to rise. John is my reason. He is my anchor, my reminder that love can be pure and unconditional. I promise myself he will never feel the way I did growing up, never second best, never unseen, never unloved. He will know stability, laughter, and a home where he is cherished every single day. That is how I will break the cycle that tried to trap me. And so, when I think back to that night, I remember the moment everything changed. I called my parents to say my husband had died in an accident, and my son was in the ICU. But they only cared about Ava's birthday. That was the day I stopped being their daughter and started being my own person. Do you believe Marley made the right choice by cutting ties with her family, or should she have kept trying to hold on to them? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd really like to hear your take. And if stories like this connect with you, don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you'll always be the first to know when a new one is posted.